You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Usually when someone is pitching you a product, the natural instinct is to just pile on the perks.
Right. Give them every single reason to buy.
Exactly. You give them one amazing reason, you can see them nodding along. So you reckon, let's check in a second benefit.
I mean, it feels like basic math. More reasons to buy should equal more persuasion.
But it doesn't. And this is where it gets properly weird. Research into how we actually process information shows this psychological quirk called the goal dilution effect.
Which essentially means adding that second claim actively weakens your pitch.
Yeah, by 12%. Adding a second benefit actually drops the perceived effectiveness of the product by 12%. Every new claim you throw at the wall just dilutes the power of your original strongest point.
It is a completely counterintuitive reality, especially since we operate in a business environment that is just obsessed with adding more features, more claims, more everything.
Which is exactly the trap we are going to unpack. As your resident vocal technologist, my mission is to help you navigate a market where everyone is obsessing over adding more features when they really, really should be doing less.
Because assuming volume equates to value is dangerous right now.
Oh, 100%. I've got this massive stack of research papers, industry articles, and my own chaotic notes sitting right here, and we're going to pull apart how trust, clarity, and artificial intelligence are colliding to completely rewire how we work and how we market products.
And the biggest area where people are adding more without thinking is AI.
Yeah, because right now it is the most misunderstood tool in the world. People think it's this magic bullet or like a Terminator-style job killer. So let's look under the hood and see what the data actually tells us. The sheer volume of usage is staggering. We are looking at 45 billion monthly sessions globally.
With ChatGPT holding a massive 89% share of that volume.
Which is absolutely wild.
When those numbers first started emerging, the immediate assumption across the tech sector was that this massive usage would cannibalize traditional search engines.
That people would just stop searching for links entirely.
Exactly. The theory was users would just start prompting models for all their answers.
I have to admit I was completely in that camp. I assumed Google must be terrified.
But that is not what is happening at all. The data shows the overall search ecosystem actually grew by 26% globally.
Wait, so it grew? AI isn't killing search?
Not at all. It is just adding an entirely new behavior on top of it. You have to look at the underlying mechanics.
Right.
People use language models for synthesis, for generating ideas or structuring their messy thoughts.
But when they need a specific verifiable fact, they still go to traditional search.
Precisely. The pie is getting bigger because our capacity to process information has expanded.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, but it leads to a part of the data that genuinely made my jaw drop. Despite these models just expanding our capabilities, there's this massive, palpable hostility towards them in the public sphere.
The demographic breakdown of who is actually most exposed to the technology is fascinating.
Yeah, because the Anthropic study completely shatters the popular narrative. I always picture the exposed worker as someone doing repetitive physical labor or basic data entry.
But the math tells a very different story.
A completely different story. The workers mathematically most exposed to AI are highly educated, older, female, and higher paid knowledge workers. We're talking senior financial analysts and computer programmers.
And to understand that demographic flip, we have to look at what highly paid knowledge work actually entails on a mechanical level.
It's not just doing complex math, is it?
No. Think about a senior financial analyst. Their job is taking chaotic, unstructured information like messy earnings calls, disjointed spreadsheets, 100-page PDF reports.
And structuring it into a clean, actionable risk assessment.
Exactly. And that specific cognitive function, structuring unstructured data, happens to be the exact thing large language models are mathematically optimized to do.
So the people who spent 20 years learning how to turn chaos into structure are suddenly watching a machine do it in 3 seconds.
Which perfectly explains the economic anxiety.
Completely. And you can see the ripple effects in the job market right now. Hiring for younger entry-level workers in these highly exposed fields has visibly slowed down.
It is like companies are hitting the pause button to figure out what a human worker is actually supposed to do anymore.
Which, forces a fundamental reevaluation of what software is even worth.
Exactly. For decades, the value of software was locked in the user interface. You were buying a tool that made it easier for a human being to do their job.
Like buying a fancy kitchen so your chef can cook faster.
Right. But the true value now lies in automation replacing the labor entirely. The most valuable layer is no longer the interface. It is the systems of record that capture structured data and give autonomous agents context.
So companies are starting to sell actual economic output. They aren't selling you the kitchen anymore. They're just selling you the finished meal.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it.
I love that analogy, but I'll throw a bit of an Aussie observation into the mix here. Right now, AI feels less like a master chef and way more like a hyperactive junior employee.
How do you mean?
In the exact type of bloke. Shows up incredibly eager, can churn through a massive amount of volume without sleeping, but has absolutely zero lived experience.
Right, they can do the volume but lack the judgment.
Exactly. You desperately need a senior manager to tap them on the shoulder when their work technically follows the brief, but just feels wrong.
And that intuition is backed up by comprehensive industry data. A major report from Figma found that despite all this automated generation, visual craft is still the absolute top design skill.
Because the hyperactive junior has no taste.
Exactly. 58% of designers and hiring managers cite it as their #1 priority, because a machine can generate 100 different interfaces in 10 seconds.
But it cannot tell if a layout is going to frustrate a user or delight them.
Taste is ultimately about challenging underlying assumptions. Artificial intelligence operates on probabilistic generation based on past data. It cannot exercise empathy.
It can't feel when a design follows every best practice, but still feels emotionally hollow.
Precisely. That human intuition, the ability to feel the friction in an experience, becomes the ultimate premium skill.
Okay, let's take that a step further. If the machines are doing all the heavy lifting and answering 45 billion prompts a month, how do human brands actually get noticed by these models?
Well, you desperately want your website to be the one the machine recommends.
Right. And this brings us to how these language models are learning to cite their research. And honestly, the terrifying illusion of confidence.
The evolution of how these models retrieve information is incredibly fast. If we look at the leap from OpenAI's GPT 5.3 to their newer GPT 5.4 model, it is a structural change in how the machine hunts for truth.
The numbers in your notes are wild. The 5.4 model cites brand websites 56% of the time.
Compared to just 8% in the older model.
How is it making that massive of a jump in accuracy?
It comes down to a mechanism we call fanning out. The newer model does not just take your prompt and try to guess the answer in one go.
It sends what, like 8.5 queries per prompt behind the scenes?
Yes. It is breaking your question down, cross-referencing information across multiple domains, and validating its assumptions before it speaks.
And crucially for businesses, it links directly to commercial and pricing pages heaps more, doesn't it?
Frequently. It cited pricing pages 138 times across 50 experimental prompts, whereas the older model only did it 4 times.
So it's actively looking for structured commercial constraints. It's basically acting as a superpowered personal shopper that reads every terms and conditions page on the internet.
Essentially, yes.
But hang on. Here is where my skepticism really kicks in. We're moving towards a world where AI voice systems are projected to handle 70 to 80% of customer service interactions.
Which is a staggering volume of voice traffic.
Right, but I have to push back on this entirely. Aren't we just automating terrible advice if an AI hallucination sounds exactly like a confident, smooth-talking radio announcer?
It is a massive liability.
Because, I mean, I would never take financial advice from a bloke at the pub just because he has a deep voice and sounds incredibly certain.
You might think you wouldn't, but human psychology suggests otherwise. There is a deep evolutionary mechanism at play regarding vocal delivery.
Wait, really? Just based on the voice?
Yes. Humans are wired for authority deference. When information is delivered with a confident, smooth, uninterrupted vocal tone, it triggers a response that bypasses our critical evaluation filters.
We equate vocal certainty with factual accuracy.
Exactly. So if the machine does not say, or and it never stumbles,
We just nod along and hand over our credit card, even if it's completely making up the return policy.
a moderately certain AI recommendation will absolutely be interpreted as absolute truth simply because of the flawless delivery.
That is terrifying. The persuasiveness is entirely independent of the actual facts. We're
is.
putting the ultimate silver-tongued salesperson on the front lines and giving them the authority to negotiate.
Which is exactly why companies desperately need institutional governance over vocal models. You cannot just deploy a voice system and let it run wild.
Right. You have to classify interactions by risk.
And more importantly, force these systems to adjust their vocal tone in real time based on their actual internal confidence levels, not just their programming to sound helpful.
So if the machine is only 60% sure about a refund policy, it should actually sound hesitant.
It should introduce conversational friction to signal its uncertainty to the human.
So it should literally be programmed to pause, say, well, I think we can do that, and lower its pitch, instead of declaring it like a royal decree. That makes total sense. But it also paints a picture of a future where consumers are just drowning in incredibly confident, smooth-talking algorithms. And because of that, human brands can't win by just being the loudest in the room anymore.
You cannot outshout a machine that never sleeps. You have to win by being the most distinct.
Which leads us directly into signal theory. In a crowded, automated market, every single action a brand takes communicates an underlying signal.
And right now, we see a lot of brands desperately chasing viral trends or cultural moments to stay relevant.
Oh, do not even get me started on that. It is always so painfully obvious when a corporate brand manager tries to jump on a meme. It's like a bloke in his 50s trying to use teen slang on the internet.
It does not make you look cool.
It just signals absolute desperation to everyone watching.
And desperation is the most destructive signal a brand can project. According to signal theory, the brands that actually survive commit to a highly specific identity.
Even if it alienates people.
Especially if it alienates people. They intentionally alienate a large segment of the population in order to attract the exact right ones.
Because if your logo can be swapped with a competitor without fundamentally changing the message, you literally have no signal.
You are just background static.
Which ties us beautifully back to the gold dilution effect we talked about at the very start. When Google Chrome launched, they didn't talk about security. They didn't talk about email integration.
They focused entirely on one single metric: speed.
And by ignoring those other genuinely useful features, they avoided diluting their primary goal. Now they hold 71% of the global market.
Five Guys did the exact same thing in the restaurant space. They limited their menus strictly to burgers and fries.
They refused to add chicken sandwiches or salads.
Just burgers and fries.
And they grew over 700% in 6 years.
Because they were absolutely clear about what they were, which removes the cognitive load from the customer. You never have to stand in a rocket. Five Guys wondering if the chicken is good, because they don't sell chicken. And you see this intense need for clarity even in the tiny everyday details of building a website.
Like that simple split test by fan tokens.
Yes, they had a button on their site that just said, buy, standard stuff.
But clicking that button redirected the user to an external cryptocurrency exchange, which naturally freaked people out.
So they changed the button to say buy on, listed the specific exchange name, and added the exchanger logos right on the button.
Which is a masterclass in reducing the friction of trust. They removed the element of surprise.
They set clear, transparent expectations at the exact point of action, eliminating the anxiety of a blind redirect.
And conversions increased by 57%, just by being clear and removing the anxiety. A 57% jump from a few extra words. It proves that in a low-trust internet, clarity is your absolute greatest asset.
And the truly smart creators are figuring out how to scale this clarity without losing their human signal. They are not using AI to generate massive amounts of low-quality content.
They're using it to accelerate their analytical process. Like that brilliant case study of the CEO who organically grew their reach to hundreds of thousands of impressions.
They didn't achieve that by telling a model to write a generic post about leadership. They used the tool to analyze hundreds of their own past high-performing posts.
To identify patterns in their own structure and storytelling, they basically used the machine to reverse engineer their own success.
They even had the model analyze their comment section to surface recurring audience questions they had missed.
And then the human CEO records their actual messy ideas using voice notes, drops that raw thought into the model, and the machine just shapes it into the proven framework for human editing.
It is not generating the thoughts. It is acting as a structural editor.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I have to pivot here because this need for crystal clear communication isn't just about external marketing. If you're managing a team right now, you know the internal operations side is usually a disaster.
There's always this massive disconnect.
Huge disconnect between the search engine optimization teams figuring out what needs to happen and the engineering teams who actually have to build it. Why do these teams constantly clash?
They clash because they are speaking entirely different languages, driven by completely different incentives. This is a critical point of failure.
Right. An optimization team makes a request, but the fix fails to ship.
And it rarely fails because the code is too complex. It fails because the framing of the request is fundamentally flawed.
The marketing person says, make this page load faster. The engineer looks at their massive backlog and goes, why should I care?
And then absolutely nothing happens, which is precisely why adopting a product requirements document, or PRD, changes the entire dynamic.
Because engineering teams aren't built to act on vague briefs.
Exactly. A PRD forces the requesting team to translate their ideas into the exact same rigorous language that product managers use. You cannot just demand better headings.
You have to clearly define the problem statement and mathematically tie it to a business impact.
So instead of a vague request, they have to say, if engineering implements these specific changes, we project a 10% increase in organic traffic.
Which historically equals exactly this much revenue. That is a massive shift in accountability.
It creates bilateral accountability. A proper PRD includes user stories, strict acceptance criteria, and even rollback thresholds if the code breaks something else.
It acts as a filter that stops vague, poorly thought out ideas from wasting expensive engineering time.
And conversely, if a requested fix is poorly implemented by the developers, the marketing team has a clear paper trail of the exact specifications that were mutually agreed upon.
It replaces internal friction with structural clarity. It's forcing clarity where there used to just be assumptions and workplace politics, which honestly brings this entire conversation full circle.
It really does.
We started by looking at how AI is fundamentally changing the nature of knowledge work. We saw the demographic reality that it's the highly educated, analytical roles that are most exposed.
Because the true economic value of software is shifting from human user interfaces to automated systems that process structured data.
And as those automated systems become exponentially more autonomous, their ability to cross-reference real brands and present information with absolute flawless vocal confidence.
It creates a completely unprecedented challenge for modern businesses.
You simply cannot rely on being the loudest or the most feature-heavy option in the room anymore, because a machine that never sleeps is going to be doing all the talking for you. You have to be the clearest.
Whether that is committing to a singular brand identity that intentionally alienates the wrong people,
Or setting crystal clear expectations on a checkout button to remove user anxiety.
or forcing your internal teams to communicate through rigorous product requirements documents.
The defining theme of this entire shift is that as machines become infinitely better at mimicking confidence and processing volume, genuine human clarity and trustworthy, distinct signals become the ultimate scarce resources. Which leaves me with one final, slightly provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your work. We spend all this time and money trying to polish our brands, using these incredible models to perfectly structure our thoughts, fix our grammar, and remove every single error so we sound perfectly confident.
Right.
But if artificial intelligence eventually gets flawlessly good at sounding polished, smooth, and utterly certain, will the ultimate premium brand of the future just be unedited, raw, human messiness? Will we eventually crave the stumbles, the typos, and the flaws just to prove there is a real beating heart on the other side of the screen? As your vocal technologist, I love pulling apart these threads with you to see where the tools are actually taking us. Keep questioning the defaults and never stop demanding clarity over clutter. Catch you next time.
Spoken Tech, for your ears.